It's exactly 8:21 a.m. News and views right here on Salam Media. And our first interview for the morning, our first guest, that is Reezwana Sumad. She is a strategy research analyst at Nedbank, and she's going to talk to us about something real important impacting on us here in South Africa, very especially our unemployed youth. Reezwana, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
Thank you indeed for agreeing to chat to us and to chat about something that is really weighing heavily on us as South African taxpayers and the country as a whole. Now, the newly appointed Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has made his position very clear regarding the basic income grant. He's gone on to say that he'd rather use the funds to help employ Black youth rather than to deliver another handout, knowing just how high the youth unemployment rate is in our country. Your thoughts on the matter in terms of where does the money come from? Does it make good sense? Can the money rather be invested in a way that is going to create jobs?
Yeah, so definitely unemployment has been for the better part of the past decade, a key social plague in South Africa. It's been one of the key issues that the government has tried and failed to address for a long time now. I don't think a basic income grant would be sort of the solution to address poverty, permanently in South Africa. And certainly the policy or the old adage goes similar to what the minister is saying. You rather teach a man to fish and feed him for his lifetime, as opposed to give a man a fish and feed him for a day. So in that aspect, it is very positive policy coming through, whereby Treasury and the Minister is focusing their efforts on employment creation, as opposed to providing permanent handouts to people and making them dependent on the state. So it is very positive. However, in the near term, given what COVID has done and given the unemployment rate that has risen quite substantially, given the very elevated levels of youth unemployment, well above 40%, in some definitions, 1 in 2 youth are unemployed and idle. In that respect, it is very important for very temporary social relief in the form of a basic income grant. However, it should not be permanent, and we think that a more lasting policy or more positive sort of economic policy would be to focus on job creation. In terms of the second part of your question with regard to where the money can come from, so the Treasury, or the government rather, has various employment initiatives that are currently running. So they've got the employment tax incentive, incentivizing businesses to employ young people by giving them tax concessions. And they've also got the expanded public works program, which aims to create temporary employment by providing skills to the most sort of vulnerable and the low-skilled sector of the economy. And however, I think that there is still funds in the fiscus that can be reprioritized to prioritize essentially employment creation, particularly among the youth. Now, we know that this year we're getting a bit of a tax windfall. We've got high commodity prices and business profitability locally rising as a result of better global growth and higher SA exports to global regions. As a result, we think that we're likely to get about 100 billion rands worth of tax revenue that is higher than was estimated in February. Now, I'm not saying that all of this should be used to prioritize youth employment or basic income grant, but there is some funds out there that can be used from this tax windfall, along with cutting other wasteful expenditure, which Treasury has done over the years in order to prioritize growth and employment generating policies.
Okay, so Reezwana, let's look, whilst the grant is set to remain in place until March 2022, the President has also recently said that the government is considering the feasibility of introducing a permanent basic income grant, that's going to defeat the whole agenda or the thinking around the new finance minister's ideas of rather, upskilling the youth and giving them jobs for life. And also added to that is we are then creating a culture of dependency or expectation.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen this play out in the past, say, 20 years or so, whereby social grant beneficiaries locally, in South Africa, has increased from about 5 million to currently 18 million beneficiaries. Whereby, if you look at the number of people employed, it's gone the other way around. So we've got now more people receiving and dependent on a social grant than more people actually employed and earning a salary in South Africa. And I know that this basic income grant or permanent basic income grant has been a feature within government discussions since as early as 2002. However, it has recently been sort of revived because of the impact and the unrest that we've seen locally. That has a reason being given is that social sort of poverty and unemployment has been driving the social unrest. However, if you look at our new finance minister, he has been saying that we need to create more sort of permanence in terms of sustaining growth locally. If we get growth up locally, GDP growth, if we have more businesses, if we have more entrepreneurs, naturally we get employment up, and naturally we're able to obtain more tax revenues to be able to spend on some of the social portfolios that government has. So whereby on the one hand we're debating a or universal basic income grant that might make the most poverty-stricken people permanently dependent on the state and not really add much sustainably to GDP growth. On the other hand, we focus, the new finance minister wants to focus on creating employment so that we can actually sustain a high level of growth in South Africa, and in that way, in a sort of more indirect but more sustainable fashion, and create more tax revenues to be able to spend on, the most vulnerable. So I think it's a debate here between sustainability of policy and growth versus a permanent sort of handout to people that's not really going to uplift their lives, on an extended long run basis.
Okay, COSATU has come on board as well, and they've called for obviously the reintroduction of this basic income grant. And because they as a trade union are involved, what's going to happen by 2022 when that grant is pulled back? Are we not going to get massive pushback against it? Are we not creating, a culture of entitlement? Because these youth that we're talking about are not going to be absorbed immediately into a job market per se, or in an upskilling program. It's going to create a lot of possibly further unrest.
Yeah. So definitely it's not going to be a 1 year sort of policy whereby youth is going to be able to become skilled or trained and then employed and absorbed into the workforce. So it's going to take a minimum between 3 to 5 years. In this period, therefore, I say a universal basic income grant or a COVID relief grant, for lack of better explanation, is a good policy to sort of help with alleviating poverty and hunger, and in a very temporary fashion. I think a grant over a 3-year period or extended, into 2022 and 2023 will be very positive and helpful for the most vulnerable. But on a permanent basis, we need to really focus on our efforts on creating employment for the young.
Okay, you're in the finance industry, financial, you're an analyst at Nedbank. So you're au fait with everything happening in finance. Your thoughts on the new appointment, the new finance minister? Are you encouraged
by his appointment? Definitely. So the finance ministry is a very key one, essentially handling the purse strings of the economy. And Minister Enoch Godongwana is well known in the international investor community. He has been, talking about economic policy and managing economic policy within the ruling party for more than a decade now. And his policies and his views seem to be very market friendly, and that's why I think the markets haven't really been impacted negatively by this sudden change in finance minister. He is well known in the international and local investor community, and has been talking about his views out there for a very long time. So I do think it was a very positive placement in that ministry. And I think that going forward, it's going to sort of show positive winds of change from an economic policy perspective, whereby previously a lot of these policies were stunted by various political decisions.
Very encouraging indeed. And on that note, Reezwana, shukran very much for talking to us and sharing your positive thoughts with us this morning regarding the basic income grant.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Exactly 8:33. And that was Reezwana Sumad. She's a strategy research analyst at Nedbank.
What makes Randery Jewelers the optimum place for your memorable gift? Is it our range of